Have you ever heard of the man with 1,000 women? Yes, I'm talking about Solomon, the wisest and richest king who ever lived. But despite all his wisdom, Solomon warned us about something very important regarding women.
Imagine.
If a man as powerful and experienced as he was, with so many women, faced problems with them, what can we learn from his story? Maybe you've experienced moments of doubt and distrust in your relationships. The pain of being deceived or betrayed can leave deep scars. But Solomon's story shows us that there is a solution. He discovered, the hard way, where true happiness lies and how to avoid traps that can destroy our peace and joy. Today, I'm going to share with you the valuable lessons that Solomon left for us, so that you too can find true happiness and avoid these same mistakes. Get ready for a journey of learning and transformation. Subscribe to your Characters of Faith and travel through the past with lessons for today. Also, hit the notification bell so YouTube will recommend our videos about biblical characters. In a land full of epic stories and deep faith, there was a tribe called Israel. This kingdom was ruled by a fearless and just man, King David. David was famous for his bravery, which became legendary when he, as a young boy, faced and defeated the giant Goliath with just a sling and a stone. Ruling a tribe like Israel was no easy task, but David always strove to be a leader who lived up to the expectations of his people and God's plans. David had many sons throughout his life, but our story focuses on one of them, a boy named Solomon. Solomon was born from a complicated union involving David and a woman named Bathsheba. The story between David and Bathsheba began with scandal and great sorrow, but God, in his infinite mercy and greater plans, blessed them with the birth of Solomon. From the beginning, Solomon showed he was special. Even though he wasn't David's oldest son, who by tradition should have been the successor to the throne, he was chosen for divine reasons for a grand destiny. God had a plan for Solomon, and this plan involved much more than wealth or military conquests. It was a plan for him to become a wise and just king. Young Solomon grew up surrounded by stories of courage and the music his father, David, played on his harp. He learned early on the importance of following God's ways and ruling with justice and compassion. He didn't just listen to his father's words, but absorbed them deeply, developing a genuine desire to be a leader who pleased God. As the years went by, David grew older and felt that his time was coming to an end. The tribe needed a new leader, someone who could continue his legacy and rule Israel with wisdom. It was then that God spoke to David, instructing him to choose Solomon as his successor. David, obedient to God's will, anointed Solomon as the next king of Israel. This moment was deeply symbolic and emotional. Solomon's anointing wasn't just an act of tradition. It was a divine confirmation that he was the chosen one to lead the people of Israel. With a heart full of humility and determination, Solomon accepted the responsibility. He knew his reign would bring immense challenges, but he also knew that with God's wisdom and guidance, he could be the king Israel needed. So began Solomon's journey, not just as David's son, but as the king chosen by God to rule Israel. His story was just starting, and he was ready to face the challenges and opportunities ahead, always with faith in God as his greatest ally. After the divine confirmation that Solomon would be the next king of Israel, the nation awaited with great expectation the beginning of his reign. David, now elderly and nearing the end of his days on earth, was determined to ensure a smooth and blessed transition for his son. The anointing ceremony of Solomon was a grand and meaningful event. On a beautiful morning, the elders of Israel, military leaders, priests, and the people gathered in Jerusalem to witness this historic moment. Solomon, still young and perhaps a bit nervous, was dressed in royal robes, reflecting the majesty and responsibility he was about to take on. The prophet Nathan, one of David's closest advisors, was present to perform the anointing. With a vial of sacred oil in hand, he approached Solomon. This anointing oil was no ordinary oil. It was a special blend, fragrant and prepared according to divine instructions. It represented God's presence and blessing over the one being anointed. The people, seeing Solomon's anointing, raised their voices in acclamation. There was a mix of joy, hope, and reverence in the air. They knew they were witnessing not just the coronation of a new king, but the continuation of God's plan for Israel. Solomon, now officially anointed, felt the weight of responsibility and the immense honor of being chosen by God to govern. Thus began Solomon's reign, marked by an auspicious start full of promise. The anointing as king was not just a ritual, but the beginning of a new era for Israel, an era of wisdom, prosperity, and faithfulness to the Lord's ways. With Solomon now reigning over Israel, he faced the great responsibility of leading a vast and diverse kingdom. Solomon knew that to be a just and effective king, he needed more than just wealth and power. He needed wisdom, God's wisdom. Shortly after being crowned, Solomon had a profound spiritual experience that would define his reign. He went to Gibeon, an important place of worship, to offer sacrifices to the Lord. Gibeon was known for its great altar, and in a gesture of devotion, Solomon offered 1,000 burnt offerings. This demonstration of faith and reverence impressed the Lord. That night, as Solomon slept, God appeared to him in a dream. In the dream, God said, "Ask for whatever you want me to give you." Imagine a moment like that, the creator of the universe offering you anything you desire. Solomon, with humility and wisdom, replied, "You have shown great kindness to your servant David, because he walked before you in truth, righteousness, and uprightness of heart. And now, O Lord, you have made your servant king in place of David, my father, but I am still young and inexperienced. Therefore, give your servant an understanding heart to judge your people and to discern between good and evil. For who is able to govern this great people of yours?" God was very pleased with Solomon's request. He could have asked for wealth, long life, or the defeat of his enemies, but he chose to ask for wisdom to govern well. So God responded, "Because you have asked for this and not for wealth, possessions, or honor, nor for the life of your enemies, nor for many days of life, but have asked for understanding to discern what is just, behold, I will do according to your words. I give you a wise and discerning heart, so that there will never have been anyone like you, nor will there ever be. And I also give you what you have not asked for, both wealth and honor, so that in your lifetime you will have no equal among kings." When Solomon woke up, he realized he had had a divine vision. He returned to Jerusalem, filled with a new and powerful wisdom, and offered sacrifices of gratitude before the ark of the Lord. With a heart full of gratitude and renewed responsibility, Solomon began to apply the wisdom God had granted him. Solomon's wisdom soon became evident to everyone. He judged difficult cases with impressive clarity and made decisions that reflected justice and compassion. The fame of his wisdom spread quickly, not only among the Israelites but also to neighboring nations. Rulers from other lands came from afar to hear Solomon's counsel and admire his ability to resolve conflicts so masterfully. Solomon's prayer for wisdom is a testament to his humility and recognition that true leadership comes from a heart that seeks to serve others with justice and discernment. This request for wisdom not only marked the beginning of Solomon's reign, but also laid the foundation for the greatest period of prosperity and peace that Israel had ever known. With Solomon's wisdom and justice well established, he prepared for one of the most significant and important undertakings of his reign: the construction of the temple in Jerusalem. This temple would not be just a physical structure, but a symbol of the covenant between God and the people of Israel, a sacred place where all could come to worship and offer sacrifices. The dream of building a temple for the Lord did not begin with Solomon, but with his father, King David. David had a great desire to build a house for God, where the Ark of the Covenant could be permanently kept. However, God told David that because he had been a man of war and had shed much blood, the construction of the temple would be left to his son. David accepted God's will and began gathering materials and resources so that Solomon could carry out this grand task. When Solomon became king, he decided it was time to fulfill his father's desire and God's will. He summoned all the main leaders of Israel, including the elders, heads of the tribes, and army officers, to organize the construction. Solomon also sent a message to King Hiram of Tyre, an ally and friend of his father, requesting cedar and cypress wood, materials known for their durability and beauty. Hiram was happy to help and sent large quantities of wood, as well as skilled carpenters and masons. In return, Solomon provided wheat, wine, and oil, establishing a fair trade that benefited both kingdoms. With the necessary materials secured, Solomon organized a workforce to begin the construction. There were thousands of workers, including stonecutters, carpenters, blacksmiths, and overseers, all dedicated to completing this monumental work. The construction of the temple took 7 years to finish. During this time, the work was meticulous and carried out with great care. The temple was built with massive stones, which were cut and prepared away from the construction site, so that no sound of hammer or tool would be heard in the sanctuary. The interior of the temple was paneled with cedar, and its walls were covered with pure gold, reflecting the glory and majesty of God. The temple had several important parts, including the Holy of Holies, where the Ark of the Covenant would be placed. Only the high priest could enter this sacred place, and only once a year on the Day of Atonement, to offer sacrifices for the people's sins. There was also the holy place, which contained the altar of incense, the table of showbread, and the golden lampstand. When the temple was finally completed, Solomon summoned the entire congregation of Israel for a grand celebration and dedication. During the ceremony, Solomon offered numerous sacrifices and prayed to the Lord, asking him to dwell in the temple and hear the people's prayers. Solomon's prayer was profound and moving, reflecting his desire for the temple to be a place where God manifested his presence and mercy. Solomon's temple became the spiritual center of Israel, a place of worship and communion with God. It was a symbol of God's faithfulness to his promises and Solomon's commitment to follow the Lord's ways. This great undertaking not only demonstrated Solomon's wisdom and skill as a leader, but also his deep desire to honor and serve God. As part of his strategy to strengthen the kingdom of Israel, Solomon sought political alliances through marriages with women from various neighboring nations. These marriages were not just personal unions, but also carefully planned diplomatic strategies to expand the influence and stability of his reign. Throughout his reign, Solomon married several princesses and daughters of kings from surrounding nations. Among his wives were women from Moab, Ammon, Edom, Sidon, and other regions. Each of these unions was accompanied by a treaty of peace and cooperation, strengthening the ties between Israel and these foreign nations. However, these political marriages were not without spiritual and political consequences. Solomon allowed his wives to practice their religions and bring their foreign deities with them. As a result, altars and temples were built in Jerusalem for gods such as Ashtoreth and Molech, which deeply displeased the Lord, as it went against the commandments given to Israel to avoid idolatry. These political alliances and spiritual compromises posed a dilemma for Solomon. While he sought to strengthen his kingdom through international connections, he also compromised Israel's spiritual purity. This duality between politics and faith would lead to significant challenges for the kingdom of Israel after his death. The influence of Solomon's foreign wives was not only spiritual but also cultural. They brought with them practices and traditions from their own countries, enriching the life at the Jerusalem court with a diversity of customs and influences. However, this diversity also created tensions among Solomon's subjects, especially among those who opposed foreign influence on the Promised Land. Despite the complications from these political alliances, Solomon held his ground as a respected and influential leader of his time. His skill in negotiating treaties and maintaining peace among rival nations was widely recognized, ensuring a period of stability and prosperity for Israel that would not be matched for many generations. However, Solomon's story also serves as a powerful reminder of the consequences of compromising divine principles in the pursuit of power and political influence. His reign, marked by the duality of wisdom and human flaws, continues to be studied as a lesson about the choices leaders face in balancing earthly governance with spiritual faithfulness. Solomon, the wise king of Israel, was known not only for his wisdom and grandeur, but also for having a large number of wives and concubines. According to biblical records, he had 700 wives of royal birth and 300 concubines. These unions were partly political strategies to strengthen alliances with other kingdoms and ensure Israel's peace and prosperity. Many of Solomon's wives were foreigners, bringing their own religious beliefs and cultural practices. These foreign influences began to infiltrate Solomon's court, including the worship of pagan gods that were revered in their homelands. Initially, Solomon remained committed to the Lord, following the commandments and teachings of his father, King David. He built the temple in Jerusalem as a sacred place for the exclusive worship of God and continued to offer sacrifices and prayers as prescribed by the law of Moses. However, as time went on, Solomon's multiple wives began to influence him more deeply. To please his wives and maintain harmony in his vast harem, Solomon allowed altars and temples to be erected for the foreign gods in Israel. Among these gods were Ashtoreth, the Canaanite goddess of fertility, and Molech, who demanded human sacrifices. These spiritual concessions marked a turning point in Solomon's life. He, who had been so respected for his wisdom and initial devotion to God, now found himself torn between his responsibilities as king and his affections for his many foreign wives. The influence of these women not only undermined the exclusive worship of God, but also weakened the spiritual integrity of the entire kingdom of Israel. Solomon's story and his many wives serve as a powerful reminder of the dangers of spiritual compromise and the consequences of straying from God's commandments. Even a man as wise and powerful as Solomon was not immune to the temptations and pressures of the world around him. Nevertheless, despite these failures, Solomon is still remembered for his wisdom and remarkable achievements, such as the construction of the temple and his proverbs, which continue to inspire and guide people to this day. Solomon, known for his wisdom and leadership in Israel, also faced significant spiritual challenges throughout his reign. Influenced by his many foreign wives, Solomon allowed the worship of other entities besides the Lord to be established in Israel. This was a deviation from the clear commandments given by God to his people. Initially, Solomon built altars and temples for the foreign gods to please his wives and maintain peace within his vast harem. Among these gods were Ashtoreth, the Canaanite goddess of fertility, and Molech, a deity worshipped with human sacrifices. These practices were strictly prohibited by the law of Moses, which commanded exclusive worship of the one true God of Israel. Solomon's spiritual deviation had profound consequences not only for him, but also for all the people of Israel. The idolatrous practices that began in the royal court soon spread throughout the kingdom, undermining true worship of God and compromising the nation's spiritual identity. This spiritual shift represented a sad irony in Solomon's life. He, who had been so blessed with divine wisdom and had built a magnificent temple for the Lord, now allowed his spiritual leadership to be weakened by foreign influences and political compromises. However, despite his mistakes, Solomon remains an example of how even the wisest and most powerful can be tempted and led astray from the path of faithfulness to God. His story serves as a powerful reminder of the importance of remaining faithful to divine principles and resisting the temptations of the world. Reflecting on Solomon's spiritual deviation, we are called to consider our own lives and the need to maintain a genuine and unwavering devotion to the Lord, even in the face of opposing pressures and influences. And you, what lesson do you take from this story? Let me know in the comments and see you in the next video.